Things are different. Yes, they're different. This is Easter. The world has changed. Did you notice how the writer of Matthew signals the change? The chapter begins with time as usual, after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was dawning. There is the Sabbath, that regular, steady, routinely observed cycle in productivity and consumption where we stop and we worship and we let God run the world instead of us. It's a pause in our running of life in order to remember who really runs it and to put God first. Then there is the first day of the week, signaling the normal, repetitive cycles of life. There is dawn, that cycle within creation, which God set up as the rhythm of time and by which our lives are regulated. There is evening and there is morning. Genesis 1 says, evening and morning. There was dawn. This is time as usual, dawn and Sabbath, first day of the week. Time that waits for no one, time that goes and goes and goes. Life and death, burial and closure. The two Marys walk to the tomb. Suddenly, there is a great earthquake. An angel has appeared, and dazzling, lighted clothes. There is lightning, and a great, blinding, brilliant white. In this blaze of glory, the angel rolls away the stone from the tomb. This impossibly heavy, preposterously heavy boulder is designed to keep death sealed up, and it is now moved. Life and death mix. Time has been altered. Things are not what they seem. The mundane is not just mundane. The earthly is not simply so. The lines between one world and another, between one time and another, have been changed. Now it's all about God's action. The angel signifies that God's own being is powerfully present. The earthquake is a herald or a drum roll to indicate a great act of God's power. And God's authority is displayed when the angel sits down on the rock, as if to say, okay, now what? Two women walking to the tomb. Suddenly, a great earthquake. Somewhere along that dusty path, the women have left one world and entered another. Without ever knowing that they had crossed the border, they left the old world, where hope is in constant danger, and might makes right, and peace has little chance. And the rich get richer, and the weak all eventually suffer under some Pontius Pilate or another. And people hatch murderous plots, and dead people stay dead. They left it, and they entered the startling, breathtaking world of resurrection and life. Jesus of Nazareth, who had been dead as a doornail on Friday afternoon, was not in his tomb that morning. And the world, theirs and ours, has been turned upside down ever since. What kinds of borders do you cross? Sometimes when I read the newspaper, I find myself crossing an emotional and spiritual border as I wonder how God views what goes on in the world. Bad things happen. Accidents occur. That's just the way it is. Conflict is just too ingrained, I say on one side. Why can't we respect each other and learn to live side by side? I say on the other. Can't argue with market forces. That's progress. Why can't we create structures to support sustainable development and differences in culture? Accidents happen, did the best they could. Should have been prevented. That's how it goes, back and forth. Good for me. How does this affect the poor? Back and forth across the border. The story is told that during the Holocaust, a Jewish father and son were in a concentration camp. Every Friday evening, the father would pull out from his pocket a candle. Where he got the candle was a mystery. And he would light the candle and begin to say the Sabbath prayers, the ancient prayers that touch the depths of faith, hope, and life. One night there was no candle, so the father took their last portion of butter and put a string through it as a wick. "What are you doing?" cried the son. "That's all the butter we have." "My son," replied the father, "we can live days without food, but we cannot live even an hour without hope." Mary Magdalene and the other Mary walk to the tomb. Somewhere they cross a border. They leave the world where suffering has control and other people define who we are. They enter a world full of hope and life defined and controlled by God. A world in which the dead do not remain dead, where those imprisoned in tombs are set free, in which those who have boulders blocking their lives see the stones rolled away. It sounds like a world that should bring joy wholeheartedly to everyone. But notice what the women feel as they leave the tomb. They left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy. Yes, the balance is greater on the side of joy. It's great joy, to be precise. And yet they are apprehensive as they leave the tomb for a skeptical and dangerous world. Not unlike us, I think. Here we are, ready for Easter, one of the most joyful and glorious days of the year. And when we try to connect some of that joy and everything being right with our normal everyday lives, we have a nagging sense that changes might be in store for us. And we become fearful. As one commentator puts it, the wonderful news of Easter is that Jesus is alive. And the terrible news of Easter is also that Jesus is alive, because nothing is nailed down anymore. The old joke about nothing being sure but death and taxes was at least half right. You can at least count on death. That's the way the world used to be. If something troubling got in the way, like a call for racial justice, or a worker for peace, or an advocate for mercy, The world could just kill it and be done with it. But Jesus is alive. And righteousness, mercy, and peace cannot be dismissed with a cross or a sword. We have to decide where we stand and what we will do in this new and frightening resurrection world. The world has changed. Things are not as they were. It's Easter. It's a resurrection world. Tom Long, professor of preaching at Emory University, tells of going with his wife to church in Atlanta. They decided they would join. And so they met with about 20 or so others in a circle in the well-appointed parlor, introducing themselves and telling what had drawn them to First Presbyterian. "We like the adult classes," said one couple. "We're going to join the choir," said another. Well, when it got around to Marvin, he said, "I came because God saved my life here." How's that for putting things in perspective? It seems that Marvin had eaten at the soup kitchen when he was homeless. And somebody there told him about Jesus and invited him to church. Now he was joining and helping with the outreach ministry. Some months later, Tom realized that he hadn't seen Marvin around very much. He asked the pastor about him and learned that Marvin was in jail. Tom went to see him. It turned out that there was an old warrant out on Marvin, which he had evaded for a long time. But since he was helping others get on their feet, telling them to fly right and straighten up, he thought he should too. And he was bothered by this untruth in his life. So he turned himself in. And now he was in jail for some months. "Marvin, how is it in here?" Tom asked. "It's not as bad as you would think," Marvin replied. "I've got a Bible study going, and there's a group getting together for prayer. Not many yet, but it's growing. God saved my life, and now I have a chance to tell these people about God. It's a resurrection world. Things are not what they seem. We have to decide where we stand and what we will do. And how do we do that? If this were a game of basketball, we might say, read the game. Even in spite of Syracuse fizzling this year, we could still read the game. Morgan will have to tell me if you say that in lacrosse, because I don't know. But it applies. Read the game. Be attentive. Respond creatively to what is going on. Interpret what you see happening, and choose your game plan accordingly. The writer of the Gospel of Matthew would say, read the story. It is not insignificant that twice in the verses we read, the disciples are told to go to Galilee. The angel says, indeed, he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him. And then Jesus says it. Go tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me. Galilee. Galilee is where the story of Jesus' ministry begins. In the second chapter of Matthew's story, we find Mary and Joseph settling in with Jesus in Galilee in order to avoid King Herod. So now the narrative loops back. The story begins again. But this time it's the disciples who will be the main travelers. Jesus will meet them there and go with them, but it's the disciples' journey. Jesus has done it once, teaching along the way, and now it's the disciples' turn, with Jesus' presence to help. Now it's our turn, with the risen Jesus to guide and direct. It reminds me of a scene in one of my favorite movies, Chocolat, and I know some of you are familiar with it. In that movie, a free spirit named Vianne and her daughter come to settle in a small village in the French countryside. Vianne opens a patisserie specializing in the most amazing chocolates that anyone has ever tasted. But the beauty is in more than the chocolate. Chocolate and freedom intertwine in the patisserie. In Vianne's interactions with the townspeople, she encourages them in the direction of wholeness and life. Over the course of the movie, a grandson is reunited with his grandmother, and a mother's bitterness is softened. A prominent man finally loosens the knots of constraint and propriety that had bound him up. A woman being beaten by her husband finds the courage to leave him and discovers new life. Eventually, she becomes Vianne's assistant. And after a while, when Vianne feels the call of the Spirit to move on, she asks Josephine to take her place. The reaction at first is denial and anger. No, you cannot go. Everything will go back to the way it was. But then an idea comes, and Josephine rushes out to talk to several townspeople. By the time Vianne is ready to leave, the townspeople have gotten to work in the patisserie. They've taken over the kitchen and are preparing chocolates just like Vianne did. You do it this way. No, more finely grated. Use your arm. Yes, that's how you do it. Vianne peeks in through the kitchen door. Josephine sees her and self-consciously comes over with a plate of sliced almonds. Are these right? Are these okay? Vianne nods her head, a look of approval shining in her eyes. It's the disciples' turn to take over the patisserie of life. They've been instructed, they've followed the teacher. He's gone places and done things that no one else could possibly do, so that they and we have it easier. And now it's time. Time to go to Galilee and begin. Do not be afraid, Jesus tells Mary. I am with you. I will meet you there. Jesus is not going, gone. He's going. And he invites us to cross the border and go into this resurrection world. Are you ready?